Consumed by rage and desperately seeking to salvage his crumbling authority, King Xenos became fixated on unlocking the secrets of Earth's advanced technology, convinced that stealing humanity's cutting-edge weapons would allow him to crush the upstart species and restore his position as the galaxy's unquestioned ruler. As whispers of rebellion grew louder among his subjugated worlds and the Galactic Council openly questioned his competence, the increasingly unhinged King Xenos set in motion a reckless plan to infiltrate human space. "This defeat is unacceptable," Xenos roared, his eyes blazing with hardly restrained rage. "The humans and their accursed technology have made a mockery of our might." Grand Vizier Malrock, his scaled features twisted into a sneer, leaned forward in his seat. "Perhaps, my king, it is time to consider alternative leadership, someone who can restore our rightful place in the galaxy." Xenos whirled on Malrock, his clawed hand twitching towards the ornate plasma pistol at his side. "You dare question my rule? I should have your forked tongue ripped out for such treachery." General Cragg, sensing the dangerous shift in the room, quickly interjected. "My king, I have a plan to regain the upper hand. Allow me to assemble a team of our finest spies, led by the incomparable Agent Zara. They will infiltrate the human worlds, steal their technological secrets, and deliver them into your hands." Xenos paused, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he considered the proposal. "See that it is done, Cragg. And Malrock, you will spread word of the human threat throughout the Empire. We must unite our people against this common enemy." As the two advisors bowed and hastily departed, Xenos sank back onto his throne, his talons digging into the armrests. The name of his nemesis, Captain Nathaniel Davis, echoed in his mind like a curse. But even as the Ferengi agents began their work, Captain Davis stood on the bridge of the Icarus, his piercing stare fixed on the stars beyond. He had not risen to command one of Earth's most advanced warships by chance. His keen tactical mind had already begun to unravel the threads of the enemy's plan. "They'll come for our technology," he said softly, his crew hanging on every word. "But they'll find more than they bargained for. We'll be ready for them, and we'll show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of." As the forces of the Ferengi Empire and the fledgling human alliance maneuvered in a deadly game of espionage and brinksmanship, the future of the stars hung in the balance. And in the shadows, ancient powers stirred, their enigmatic agendas yet to be revealed in the looming conflict that would reshape the very fabric of the universe. The bustling spaceport of Novus Prime teemed with a kaleidoscope of alien life. Agent Zara's scales rippled with unease as she led her team through the crowded terminal, their refugee disguises holding up under the scrutiny of bored customs officials. The acrid stench of ion exhaust mingled with the exotic aromas of a dozen different species' cuisines, assaulting Zara's sensitive olfactory glands. "Remember," she hissed to her team, "we are victims fleeing Ferengi oppression. Stay in character." They melted into the diverse throng, their true purpose concealed beneath layers of carefully crafted deception. Zara's eyes darted across the sea of faces, searching for their contact. A gruff voice cut through the din. "Follow me," Jax grunted, leading them through winding back alleys to a nondescript warehouse. Inside, crates of illicit weapons lined the walls. Jax's eyes gleamed with avarice as he outlined his plan to infiltrate the nearby military outpost. "It'll cost you," he said, rubbing his fingers together. "Ferengi gold spends as well as any." "Aye, sir," Ramirez replied, already striding towards the hangar bay. Days later, as Zara and her team crept through the shadows of the human military outpost, alarms blared. Commander Ramirez burst into the secure weapons lab, his plasma rifle raised. "Freeze!" he shouted, but Zara was already in motion. Ramirez dove for cover, returning fire as he shouted into his comm unit. "This is Commander Ramirez! We have a code red! Ferengi infiltrators in the weapons lab!" The firefight intensified, Ferengi and human soldiers trading salvos of deadly energy. Zara clutched the stolen prototype to her chest, her scales slick with sweat as she fought to reach the exit. Jax Moreno appeared in the doorway, his face contorted with desperation. "This way!" he shouted, gesturing wildly. The two men grappled fiercely, buying precious seconds for the Ferengi infiltrators to escape into the wilderness beyond the outpost. Ramirez finally subdued Jax, slamming him to the ground. "Why?" he demanded, his voice raw with anger and exertion. Jax coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Sometimes you gotta pick a side," he wheezed, "even if it's the wrong one." On Zax's prime, King Xenos paced his opulent throne room, scales overflowing with anticipation. A holographic projection flickered to life, displaying General Kragg's serpentine visage. "My king," Kragg reported, "Agent Zara has succeeded. The human weapon is ours." Xenos' eyes gleamed with malevolent glee. "Excellent. Begin analysis immediately and intensify our espionage efforts. I want every scrap of human technology laid bare before me." As the projection faded, Xenos turned to gaze out at the glittering expanse of his empire. Beneath the veneer of triumph, a seed of doubt took root. What other secrets did the humans possess? And how long could he maintain his grip on power in the face of growing unrest? The stolen weapon was only the beginning. The true battle for galactic supremacy loomed on the horizon, with humanity and the Ferengi Empire hurtling towards an inevitable collision. Agent Zara's breath came in ragged gasps as she and her two surviving operatives crashed through the dense underbrush of Novus Prime's wilderness. The stolen prototype weapon pulsed against her chest, its unfamiliar energy signature setting her nerve endings on fire. Behind them, the shouts of Commander Ramirez's pursuit team grew fainter, but Zara knew they weren't safe yet. "We need to find shelter," she hissed to her companions. "Our supplies are almost gone." As if in answer, a figure materialized from the shadows ahead. Zara raised her blaster, but the newcomer held up empty hands. "I am Varya," the alien said, her luminescent eyes fixed on the prototype. "We've been watching you, Agent Zara. You need our help, and we need that weapon." Exhausted and out of options, Zara nodded grimly. "Lead the way." Varya guided them through a hidden network of caves to a makeshift rebel outpost. Banks of cobbled-together computer terminals lined the walls, while haggard-looking aliens of various species huddled around strategy tables. "Let's see this human weapon," Varya said, extending a hand. Reluctantly, Zara surrendered the prototype. Varya's team of engineers immediately set to work, their excited chatter filling the cavern as they probed its secrets. "Incredible," one of them muttered. "This directed energy system, it could tear through our strongest shields without difficulty." Varya's eyes narrowed. "If Xenos gets his claws on this, he'll be unstoppable." She turned to Zara, her expression hard. "We have a proposition. Help us use this prototype to lure Xenos into a trap. We'll cripple his forces and deal a blow to his empire." "Incoming transmission," a rebel technician called out. It's from the human ship, Icarus." Varya cursed. "They're tracking us somehow. We need to move now." As the rebels scrambled to evacuate, another alert sounded. A rebel scout's panicked voice crackled over the comms. "Multiple Ferengi warships entering the system. They're led by General Kragg's flagship." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. Kragg was here. The notorious hunter-killer would stop at nothing to secure the prototype for Xenos. "We're out of time," Varya snapped. "Are you with us, Agent Zara? Will you help us spring our trap on Xenos?" Zara's mind raced, weighing her options as the cavern erupted into chaos. The stolen prototype hummed against her scales, a constant reminder of the power she held. With a sharp nod to Varya, she made her decision. "I'm in. Let's take down Xenos." Varya's luminescent eyes flashed with approval. "Move out! To the emergency shuttles!" The ragtag group of rebels scrambled through winding tunnels as alarms blared. Zara and her two Ferengi operatives fell in line, their refugee disguises discarded. As they emerged onto a hidden landing pad, a barrage of plasma fire erupted from the tree line. "Incoming!" Krax bellowed, his massive frame providing cover as rebels returned fire. Zara clutched the prototype, diving into the nearest shuttle. The engines roared to life, lifting off just as a human strike team breached the perimeter. Through the viewport, she glimpsed Commander Ramirez, his face contorted with fury as the shuttles escaped into the atmosphere. Hours later, Zara stood on the bridge of an aging freighter, repurposed as the rebels' mobile base. A holographic star map flickered before her, Varia's finger tracing their trajectory. "We'll rendezvous with our main force here," Varia explained, indicating a remote asteroid base. "Then we strike at the heart of Xenos' empire." Cracks, his scarred face etched with suspicion, loomed over Zara. "And how do we know we can trust you, Ferengi?" Zara met his gaze unflinchingly. "Xenos is as much my enemy as yours. I've seen firsthand the suffering he's inflicted across the galaxy." "Evasive maneuvers!" Varia shouted, gripping the command console. As the freighter vanished into hyperspace, tensions aboard the ISS Icarus reached a fever pitch. Captain Davis paced the bridge, Alta's warning echoing in his mind. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern faces of the Galactic Council's tribunal. Davis's teeth gritted. "Understood, Counselor. We'll contain the situation." "My king," Cragg reported, "we've tracked the rebels to the Outer Rim. My hunter squad stands ready to retrieve the prototype and crush this insurgency." As Cragg departed, Xenos sank back into his throne. Outside, the first ships of his mighty armada began to assemble for the parade. Soon he would remind the galaxy of Ferengi supremacy, and woe to any who dared stand in his way. The rebel freighter dropped out of hyperspace above Zax Prime, its hull scarred from recent battles. On the bridge, Varia surveyed the planet's glittering cityscape. Her luminescent eyes narrowed. "There," she said, gesturing to a holographic map. "The parade route passes through the central square. We'll set up the prototype here, on the roof of the Commerce Guild building." Zara nodded, her scales rippling with nervous energy. "My team can provide overwatch and warn of any incoming security forces." As the rebels prepared for their daring assault, the streets of Zax Prime's capital swelled with cheering crowds. Ferengi citizens waved banners emblazoned with Xenos' image, their scales gleaming in the harsh sunlight. High above in his opulent flagship, King Xenos preened before a gilded mirror. "Is everything ready, Malrock?" he asked his aide. Malrock bowed low, his eyes betraying nothing. "Of course, Your Majesty. The parade awaits your glorious presence." "Target acquired," she whispered into her comm unit. "Awaiting your order, Varia." In the streets below, General Cragg's eyes darted suspiciously from shadow to shadow. Something felt off, but he couldn't place it. As Xenos' transport touched down, Cragg's hand instinctively tightened on his disruptor pistol. The instant Xenos emerged, resplendent in his ceremonial armor, Varia's voice crackled through the rebel comms. "Now!" Zara activated the prototype. A blinding beam of energy lanced out, slicing through the transport's shields like they were tissue paper. The vehicle's repulsor engines sputtered and died, leaving Xenos trapped inside the smoking wreck. Chaos erupted. Rebel strike teams converged on the square, exchanging fire with Ferengi security forces. Civilians scattered, their celebratory cheers replaced by screams of terror. Cragg bellowed orders, rallying his troops to form a protective cordon around the disabled transport. "Protect the king at all costs!" From a nearby alleyway, Captain Davis and his strike team emerged, their Federation-issue phasers set to heavy stun. "Move in!" Davis shouted. "Secure that prototype!" Caught in the crossfire, Zara and her team fought desperately to hold their position. The prototype's energy reserves were dangerously low after its powerful blast. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the government district. Malrock's voice boomed from every communication device in the city. "People of the Ferengi Empire, the tyrant Xenos has fallen. I, Malrock, now assume control for the good of all Ferengi." Amidst the growing bedlam, Varia led a small team towards Xenos' smoking transport. They fought through waves of security forces, inching closer to their prize. On the roof, Zara watched in horror as Federation troops advanced on her position. The prototype was moments away from overheating, its unstable energy core on the verge of detonation. "Varia," she shouted into her comm, "we're about to lose the weapon. Whatever you're going to do it now." Below, Varia's team finally reached the transport. They wrenched open the twisted hatch to find King Xenos, dazed but alive. As they dragged the protesting monarch from the wreckage, Captain Davis's voice cut through the din. Varia hesitated for a split second, then made her decision. "Fall back to the extraction point," she ordered. We've got what we came for. As rebel forces began their fighting retreat, Zara realized she had no choice. She aimed the unstable prototype at the advancing Federation troops and pulled the trigger one last time. The weapon discharged in a blinding flash of light and searing heat, forcing Davis and his team to take cover. When the energy dissipated, the prototype was a smoking ruin, but it had bought the rebels the precious seconds they needed. Zara sprinted for the waiting shuttle, plasma bolts sizzling past her head. In the streets below, General Cragg watched in disbelief as rebel ships lifted off, carrying both King Xenos and the mutinous Mal Rock. His troops were in disarray, torn between conflicting loyalties and the urge for self-preservation. The rebel fleet dropped out of hyperspace, their engines flaring as they decelerated towards a barren, rust-colored moon. Aboard the lead ship, Zara watched as Varia paced the cramped bridge, her luminescent eyes fixed on the interface. "Welcome to our new home," Varia said, gesturing to the desolate landscape below. "At least until we decide what to do with our guest." In the cargo hold, King Xenos sat in a force field cell, his once regal armor scuffed and dented. He glowered at his captors, scales rippling with awe-inspiring fury. As the rebels established their base over the following days, tensions simmered. Zara overheard heated arguments between Varia and her lieutenants, their voices echoing through the prefab corridors. "We need to execute him publicly," one hardliner insisted. "Show the galaxy the price of tyranny." Varia's voice was measured but firm. "And martyr him? No, we negotiate. Use him to ensure a peaceful transition." The disagreements grew more frequent, more volatile. Zara found herself caught between factions, her loyalty to Varia tested by the hardliners' passionate rhetoric. Across the stars, General Cragg stood on the bridge of his flagship, surveying a holographic map of Ferengi space. Red indicators flashed, marking system after system falling to Mal Rock's forces. "Status report," Cragg barked. A junior officer saluted. "Sir, House Duras has pledged their support. Their fleet awaits your command." Cragg's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Excellent. Prepare the armada. We'll start with the outer rim and work our way in." The general's eyes narrowed as he studied the rebel-controlled sectors. "Hold on, Your Majesty," he muttered. "We're coming." On the ISS Icarus, Captain Davis sat alone in his ready room, the weight of the Galactic Council's latest communique heavy on his shoulders. The words on his datapad blurred as he considered the implications. A chime at his door broke his reverie. "Enter." Commander Ramirez stepped in, his face grim. "Sir, we've received a priority transmission. It's Varia." Davis's eyebrows shot up. "Put her through." Hours later, as the Icarus cruised through an asteroid field, Davis brought his senior staff up to speed. "We're taking a risk," he concluded, "but I believe aiding Varia is our best chance for long-term stability." As if in response to his words, the ship rocked violently. Red alert klaxons blared. Davis sprinted to the bridge, barking orders. "Evasive maneuvers! Return fire!" The Icarus dove and rolled, narrowly avoiding the brunt of the Ferengi barrage. Phaser beams lanced out, scoring hits against the enemy shields. The traitorous woman's face filled the view screen, her expression triumphant. "Did you really think your little alliance would go unnoticed, Davis? Surrender now, and perhaps General Cragg will be merciful." Davis's expression resolute. "Like hell! Helm, get us out of here!" Back on the rebel base, Varia made her decision. She strode into the makeshift broadcast center, technicians scrambling to hook up salvaged equipment. "You will confess," she hissed. "You will admit to every failure, every shortcoming of our people, and you will acknowledge humanity's superiority." Turning to his most trusted aide, he said, "Contact the humans. I have an offer they won't be able to refuse." Mal Rock's face vanished from the view screen as Varia cut the transmission. She turned to her advisors, her luminescent eyes blazing with fierce persistence. Within hours, reports flooded in of planetary governors declaring allegiance to various factions. Some rallied behind General Cragg, others pledged loyalty to Mal Rock, and a growing number threw their support behind Varia's rebel movement. Zara burst into the command center, her scales flushed with excitement. Varia, you need to see this. The IFS Conqueror, Varia breathed, her voice a mixture of awe and dread. The rebel strongholds never stood a chance. One by one, they fell to the Conqueror's unmatched firepower. Varia's forces found themselves in a desperate retreat, always one step ahead of annihilation. The Council's holographic avatars materialized before him, their alien features impassive. Your request is denied, Captain, the Vorlon counselor interrupted. The terms of our neutrality mandate are clear. Davis smacked his palm on the console. Damn it! Don't you see what's happening? If Cragg gets his hands on more human tech... Commander Ramirez approached cautiously. Sir, what are your orders? Davis took a deep breath, his mind racing through the possibilities. Finally, he spoke. Set a course for the Tantalus sector. We're going to rendezvous with the rebels. The Icarus dropped out of warp in a remote star system, far from prying eyes. A battered rebel cruiser limped alongside, and soon Varia and her top lieutenants materialized in the Icarus's transporter room. Davis led them to the briefing room, where a holographic display of the Conqueror rotated slowly. We need to take out that ship, he said grimly. Our intel suggests it's currently in the Vega cluster. If we hit hard and fast... Davis and Varia sprinted to the bridge, where chaos reigned. The view screen showed a swarm of Ferengi vessels, led by a sleek, deadly-looking ship. All hands, abandon ship, he ordered. Get to the escape pods. Ramirez spotted her on a security feed and gave chase. They played a deadly game of hide-and-seek through the bowels of the dying ship, exchanging weapons fire and near misses. Finally cornered in engineering, Idra turned to face Ramirez, her alien features twisted in a snarl. You don't know what you're dealing with, human, she spat. Idra's laugh was cold and bitter. I'm more human than you think. A little gift from your kind, mixed with Ferengi ingenuity, the perfect infiltrator. Before Ramirez could respond, another explosion rocked the ship. Idra seized the moment, lunging for an escape pod. Ramirez hesitated for a split second, torn between stopping her and saving his own life. In the end, survival won out. He dove into a nearby pod, watching helplessly as Idra's pod streaked away towards a waiting Ferengi ship. As the Icarus broke apart, escape pods scattered in all directions. Varia's remaining ships provided what cover they could, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. Just as all hope seemed lost, a brilliant flash of light heralded the arrival of an unknown fleet. Sleek, angular ships of unfamiliar design dropped out of warp, immediately engaging Cragg's forces. Who the hell are they? Davis wondered aloud as his escape pod was tractored aboard one of the mysterious vessels. Varia's voice crackled over the comm system. I don't know, but right now, they're our only chance. As the battle raged around them, Davis and Varia could only watch and wonder what new power had entered the fray, and what their arrival would mean for the future of the galaxy. The mysterious fleet materialized in a dazzling array of light, sleek ships unlike anything Davis had ever seen. Their angular hulls gleamed as they unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, tearing through the Conqueror's shields effortlessly. Rylothi, Varia breathed, her luminescent eyes wide. But how? One of the Ferengi commandos struck him across the face. Shut it, human! You're our ticket out of here! In the confusion, no one noticed as Idra slumped to the floor, unconscious from a stray hit. The team, more focused on escape than their fallen leader, shoved her limp form into a shuttle before blasting off into the melee outside. On the rebel base, Varia stood tall, her claws digging into Xenos' scales as she forced him to watch the monitors. The once proud king's eyes widened in horror as he saw his prized conqueror, the pinnacle of Ferengi military might, crumble under the combined assault. Look, Varia growled. Look at what your arrogance has wrought. Xenos could only whimper as explosions bloomed across the massive dreadnought's hull. In the heart of the battle, General Cragg's eyes darted frantically across his tactical displays. Everything was falling apart. With a snarl of frustration, he punched in the override codes for his personal fighter. Sir, one of his officers protested, you can't abandon... Cragg's energy blade sliced through the air, decapitating the subordinate in one swift motion. I can do whatever I damn well please, he growled, stepping over the body as he made his way to the hangar. As the battle wound down, the rebel shuttles regrouped, linking up with their, Rylathi saviors. In one of the cramped passenger compartments, a junior technician stumbled upon Idra's unconscious form. "Captain," he called out, rifling through the Ferengi operative's pockets. "You need to see this." Davis hurried over, his eyes widening as he saw the data cube in the tech's hand. "Are those—" A predatory grin spread across Davis's face. "Well now," he said softly, "isn't that interesting?" Across the sector, on Zax Prime, Malrock paced his opulent chambers. Hollow screens flickered around him, each one bringing more bad news. Uprisings on a dozen worlds, fleets turning on each other. The Ferengi Empire was tearing itself apart. Malrock froze. "Put it through," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The holographic form of a human in an unfamiliar uniform materialized before him. "Greetings, Malrock," the figure said, its tone eerily calm. "I have a proposition for you." "You?" The hologram flickered, revealing a face that made Malrock's blood run cold. Malrock's mind raced. Drake's reputation preceded him. A brilliant tactician who had long advocated for humanity's violent secession from the Galactic Council. "What do you want?" he hissed. Drake's eyes glittered. "An alliance. Full amnesty if you surrender and abdicate all claim to the Ferengi throne. My fleet can crush the remaining resistance, but only if you relinquish authority over all subjugated Ferengi territories to us." Malrock's tentacles twitched as he weighed his options. With Crag's forces in disarray and the rebels gaining ground, his grip on power was tenuous at best. "And if I refuse?" Drake's smile widened. "Then we'll simply take what we want from whoever's left standing in this little civil war of yours." On the rebel base, Captain Davis paced before a dejected Xenos. "We should execute him," he urged Varia. "End his tyranny once and for all." Varia's luminescent eyes narrowed. "No, he may yet prove useful as a bargaining chip. We need a peaceful transition, not more bloodshed." Before Davis could argue further, alarms blared throughout the base. A junior officer burst in, scales pale with fear. "Multiple Ferengi warships dropping out of warp. It's Malrock's forces." As chaos erupted around them, General Crag's prototype fighter emerged from the shadows of a nearby asteroid field. His mandibles clicked in anticipation as he locked onto the rebel base's coordinates. "Time to end this," he growled. Suddenly, his tactical display lit up with new contacts. An entire armada of sleek, angular ships, unlike anything he'd seen before. Crag's eyes widened as he recognized the design. "Humans," he snarled. "Drake's separatists." On Zax Prime, Malrock made his decision. "I accept your terms, Admiral," he said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his lower appendages. "But know this, the moment you betray me, I'll—" In a desperate bid to salvage his ambitions, Crag reached out to House Duras. "Join me," he pleaded over a secure channel. "Together, we can still—" The Duras matriarch's laughter cut him off. "Oh, Crag, you fool, we've already made our choice." The channel went dead as Duras ships opened fire on Crag's dwindling fleet. Davis grabbed her arm. "What about you?" Varia's eyes gleamed with commitment. "I'm staying behind. Someone has to buy you time." Before Davis could protest, she was gone, racing toward the base's reactor core. The captain hesitated for a moment, then barked orders to his crew. "Move out! Get the prisoner to the shuttle!" In the aftermath, Drake's fleet prowled the outskirts of Ferengi space, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The human admiral smiled as reports flooded in. Malrock's tenuous grip on power, Crag's desperate last stand, House Duras's betrayal, and the scattered rebel remnants led by a grief-stricken Davis. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, "all pieces are in place. Your orders?" Drake's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Now," he said softly, "we show them the true meaning of human ingenuity." "Status report," he barked. His second-in-command, Commander Vex, stepped forward. "Malrock's forces have integrated smoothly with ours, sir. We've established control over 73% of Ferengi territory." Drake nodded, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "And the transition efforts?" "This can't be happening," he muttered, tossing a datapad onto his desk. Davis ran a hand through his hair. Drake's not stopping at the Ferengi. He's funneling weapons to extremist groups in human space. But without council authorization, our hands are tied. Chen's eyes widened. What about Varia's rebels? Could they... Moments later, a haggard Varia stumbled onto the bridge. "Davis," she gasped, "we need to talk." "You want to free Xenos?" he exploded. "After everything he's done?" Varia's luminescent eyes flashed. "It's our only chance. Drake's choking the life out of my people. We need a figurehead to rally the loyalists." Davis paced, his mind racing. "It's insane. You'd be giving that monster a chance to regain power." "Maybe," Varia conceded, "but right now, he's our best weapon against Drake." Hours later, as the Icarus hung in the shadow of a gas giant, Davis watched the escape unfold. Rebel operatives, their ships rigged to look like pirate vessels, swarmed the prison transport carrying Xenos. In the ensuing chaos, the deposed king slipped away, ferried to safety by Varia's most trusted agents. On the fringes of Ferengi space, Xenos wasted no time. His silver tongue worked its magic, drawing disaffected exiles and malcontents to his banner. Within weeks, a ragtag fleet assembled, ready to strike at Drake's supply lines. "All ships," he growled, "fire at will." The rebel fleet unleashed hell. Plasma torpedoes and disruptor beams tore through the shipyard's defenses. As Drake's garrison scrambled to respond, Xenos allowed himself a cold smile. "Let the Admiral come," he muttered. "I'll be waiting." Across the sector, in his opulent command center, Drake received news of the attack. His face contorted with rage as he watched footage of his prized shipyard reduced to twisted metal and floating debris. "Find them!" he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "I want Xenos' head on a pike." In the command center of his hidden base, Xenos pored over star charts, plotting his next move. A aide burst in, breathless with excitement. Xenos' mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Excellent. Inform the captains. We strike at dawn." Xenos' flagship, the Defiant, dropped out of warp in the shadow of a gas giant. The bridge hummed with tension as tactical displays lit up with incoming enemy signatures. Xenos' mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Excellent. Deploy our stealth frigates to the asteroid field. When Drake's vanguard enters the kill zone, spring the trap." The ensuing battle was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare. Xenos' ships struck from the shadows, their plasma torpedoes gutting Drake's capital ships before melting back into the asteroid field. The human admiral's frustrated bellows echoed across the comm channels as his prized fleet was slowly picked apart. But before Chen could comply, proximity alarms blared. A massive Orlevan freighter materialized off their starboard bow, disgorging a swarm of smaller craft. Davis's eyes widened in shock. "Are those slave transports?" Chen's face paled as she scanned the readings. "Confirmed, sir. They're packed with Ferengi civilians." Fury etched itself across Davis's features. "Weapons free! Target those transports!" "Set course for these coordinates," he ordered, inputting a string of numbers. "It's time we had a chat with our old friend Xenos." Hours later, in a hidden rebel base, Davis stood face to face with his former nemesis. Xenos regarded him with cold amusement. "So the noble captain seeks an alliance," the Ferengi warlord drawled. "How deliciously ironic." Davis gritted his teeth. "Save it, Xenos. You know why I'm here. Drake's gone too far." Xenos leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "Indeed he has, and what do you propose we do about it?" Their audacious plan came together swiftly. While Varia led a daring raid on Drake's shipyards, Davis and Xenos would infiltrate Orlevan Station, the nexus of the weapons trafficking operation. The mission went sideways almost immediately. As they breached the station's outer defenses, klaxons blared. Drake's voice boomed over the station's speakers. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this, Xenos?" the human admiral taunted. "Your predictability is almost disappointing." His words were cut short as Xenos' fist connected with his jaw. The Ferengi's eyes blazed with triumph as he hefted the unconscious human over his shoulder. "Oh, Captain," Xenos chuckled darkly, You've just become my most valuable asset. In the aftermath, Xenos' face filled view screens across the galaxy. Behind him, a battered and bound Captain Davis knelt at gunpoint. Admiral Drake, Xenos' voice dripped with malice. Your occupation ends now. Withdraw your forces immediately, or watch as I execute this paragon of human virtue before the eyes of the galactic community. Drake's fist clenched as he weighed his options. With his shipyards in ruins and his syndicate connection exposed, the once mighty admiral found himself trapped in an impossible situation of his own making. Drake's face contorted with rage as he glared at the view screen, Xenos' ultimatum ringing in his ears. The sight of Captain Davis, bound and battered, sent a wave of conflicting emotions through the admiral. Fury at being outmaneuvered warred with a cold calculation of his remaining options. Drake's fist slammed against the armrest of his command chair. Initiate withdrawal protocols, he growled, but make it slow. Buy us time. As Drake's forces began their grudging retreat from Ferengi space, the admiral retreated to his private chambers. He activated a heavily encrypted channel, his voice low and urgent as he spoke to a shadowy figure on the other end. I need more ships, more weapons, whatever it takes. Meanwhile, aboard Xenos' flagship, Captain Davis lay on the cold floor of his cell, his mind racing. He ran his fingers along the seam of his uniform, feeling the thin strip of metal he'd managed to work free from his bunk. With agonizing slowness, he began to saw at the restraints binding his wrists. Hours passed. Davis's arms ached, but commitment fueled him. Finally, with a muffled snap, the restraints gave way. He allowed himself a grim smile before setting to work on the cell's rudimentary lock. The corridor outside was deserted. Davis crept along, every nerve on high alert. He rounded a corner and came face to face with two Ferengi guards. Without hesitation, he launched himself at them, using the element of surprise to his advantage. Alarms blared as Davis sprinted through the hangar bay, diving into the cockpit of a sleek Ferengi fighter. His fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, muscle memory from countless simulations kicking in. The engines roared to life just as security forces burst into the bay, disruptor fire peppering the fighter's hull. Davis punched in a set of coordinates, praying that Varia's rebel cell was still active. As the fighter streaked away from Xenos' flagship, he broadcast a tightly encrypted message on an old resistance frequency. Varia, it's Davis. I'm out, but not safe. Sending coordinates now. Be ready for anything. Back on Xenos' bridge, the Ferengi king seethed with anger. Find him, he roared. I want every bounty hunter and mercenary in the sector on high alert. As Xenos raged, his protege Jera approached, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous intelligence. My lord, she said, her voice silky smooth, perhaps we should consider a more proactive approach. Xenos turned, his interest piqued. Go on. Jera outlined her audacious plan, detailing surgical strikes against key human installations. Xenos listened, his mandibles clicking in approval. Make it happen, he ordered. And Jera, spare no expense. The Syndicate will provide whatever tools you need. Light years away, Captain Davis's stolen fighter limped through an uncharted sector of space. Warning lights flashed across his console as fuel reserves dwindled. He allowed himself a moment of hope as a familiar energy signature appeared on his sensors. Varia's ship. But before he could hail them, a massive energy surge lit up his scanners. Drake's armada dropped out of warp, surrounding him in an impenetrable net of firepower. As Drake's forces resumed their push into Ferengi space, Varia received Davis's truncated distress call. Her fists clenched as she realized how close they'd come to rescuing him. With unbreakable spirit, she turned to her assembled rebel leaders. We can't win this alone, she said, her voice steady. It's time to reach out to every Ferengi loyalist faction we can find. Drake thinks he has us beaten. Let's show him what real resistance looks like. Across the sector, disparate rebel cells began to coalesce. Varia's call to arms spread like wildfire, igniting a spark of hope in those who had been ground under Drake's heel. As plans for Operation Libertas took shape, the balance of power began to shift once more. The sector blazed with the fires of war, Admiral Drake's fleet bore down on the united rebel forces, their ships a relentless tide of destruction. Aboard his command vessel, Drake's eyes gleamed with anticipation as he gazed upon his latest weapon. "Prepare the Purifier for deployment," he ordered, his voice cold and precise. Across the battlefield, Xenos paced the bridge of his flagship, mandibles clicking with agitation. "Status report on the Purifier?" His second-in-command, a battle-scarred Ferengi, shook his head. "Our intelligence was correct, my lord. Its firepower is beyond anything we've encountered." Xenos' eyes narrowed. "Then we have no choice. Deploy Jera and her team. They must disable that monstrosity before it obliterates our last strongholds." In the launch bay, Commander Jera checked her disruptor one last time. Her strike team, the finest warriors in the Xenos' army, stood ready. Their stealth shuttle slipped away from the rebel fleet, cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Drake's sensors. As they approached the Purifier, Jera's heart raced. The dreadnought's size dwarfed even her worst fears. "Now," Drake commanded. But Drake's forces had planned for every contingency. Force fields sprang to life, cutting off escape routes. One by one, Jera watched her elite warriors fall. Light years away, in a nondescript rebel safehouse, Captain Davis hunched over a battered communications array. His fingers flew across the controls, encrypting an urgent message to the Council. The message streaked across subspace as Davis turned his attention back to coordinating Varia's dwindling resistance cells. Time was running out, and the fate of the sector hung in the balance. Aboard the Icarus, Davis's fingers flew over the console, coordinating with Varia's scattered forces. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of warp, joining the ragtag fleet of rebel vessels. "Status report," Davis barked, striding onto the bridge. Davis nodded grimly. "Patch me through to Xenos." The Ferengi's face materialized on the screen, mandibles twitching with barely suppressed fury. "Captain, I trust you bring good news?" "Better than that," Davis replied. "I bring a plan." As Davis outlined the audacious strike mission, Xenos' eyes glittered with grudging admiration. "It's insane," he hissed, "but it might just work." In the Icarus's hangar bay, Davis addressed the assembled strike team. Human Marines stood shoulder to shoulder with Ferengi warriors, united by desperation and shared purpose. "I won't lie to you," Davis said, his voice carrying across the cavernous space. "This mission is high risk, with a low probability of survival, but it's our only shot at taking down the Purifier." As the strike team boarded their assault shuttles, alarms blared through the Icarus. "Sir!" Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "Jera's diversionary attacks have begun. Drake's fleet is responding." "Launch all fighters," Davis ordered. "Give us the cover we need." The hangar bay erupted into controlled chaos as rebel ships streamed into the void. Davis's shuttle rocketed forward, leading the charge towards the looming silhouette of the Purifier. Disruptor fire lit up the darkness of space. Davis gritted his teeth as the shuttle bucked and weaved, evading the dreadnought's outer defenses. A rebel fighter exploded off their port side, the concussion rocking the small craft. Davis turned to his team, faces grim behind their environmental helmets. "Remember your training. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop until that reactor core is destabilized." The shuttle's hull screamed as it pierced the Purifier's shields. With a bone-jarring impact, they crashed through the outer hull, the shuttle's specialized breaching pod forming an airtight seal. "Go, go, go!" Davis shouted, leading the charge into the bowels of Drake's monstrous vessel. Suddenly, the deck beneath their feet lurched. Emergency klaxons wailed as entire sections of the ship began to decompress. "Kern!" Davis snarled, recognizing the brutal tactics of Drake's enforcer. "Everyone, mag boots on! We're about to lose gravity!" The world tilted sickeningly as artificial gravity failed. Davis watched in horror as two of his Marines were sucked into the void, their screams cut off as the vacuum claimed them. "Push forward!" he roared, firing his grappling line to propel himself down the now vertical corridor. "We can't let their sacrifice be in vain." As they fought their way towards the reactor core, Davis's comms crackled to life. Jackson's gruff voice cut through the static. "Captain, We're pinned down at the outer reactor ring. Can't hold much longer. Davis made a split-second decision. Hold that position as long as you can, Lieutenant. We'll push on to the core. They reached the final bulkhead, the pulsing energy of the reactor core visible through reinforced viewports. Davis turned to his demolitions expert. Set the charges. We'll hold them off. As the Marine worked feverishly to plant the explosives, Davis and his team formed a protective cordon, the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as disruptor bolts flew back and forth. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship. Davis stumbled, nearly losing his footing in the zero-G environment. "What the hell was that?" he shouted into his comm. Jackson's voice came back, thick with static and barely audible over the sound of alarms. "Sorry, Captain. Looks like we're out of time. We're going out with a bang." Davis's eyes widened as he realized what Jackson had done. The lieutenant's sacrifice had destabilized the reactor, but they were now caught in the epicenter of a looming catastrophe. "Fall back," Davis ordered, grabbing the arm of his nearest Marine. "We need to get off this ship now." Davis's lungs burned as he led his battered team through the purifier's twisting corridors. Alarms blared, emergency lights bathing everything in an eerie red glow. The ship groaned and shuddered, the reactor's instability threatening to tear it apart at any moment. "This way," Davis shouted, gesturing towards an unmarked hatch. He slammed the emergency release, revealing a compact escape pod bay. As his Marines piled in, Davis's comm crackled. "Captain, we've got company." He spun, disruptor raised. A squad of Syndicate shock troops rounded the corner, weapons blazing. Davis dove into the pod, slamming the hatch shut as disruptor fire scorched the hull. "Punch it," he ordered. The pod tumbled end over end, inertial dampeners straining. As they stabilized, Davis's eyes widened at the sight before him. Where the purifier had stood, there was now only a rapidly expanding field of debris. "By the stars," one of his Marines whispered. "We did it." "Not today," Davis growled. He keyed the emergency thrusters, sending their pod on a collision course with the corvette's docking bay. His Marines moved with ruthless efficiency, securing the bridge in a matter of minutes. Davis slid into the pilot's seat, fingers dancing across unfamiliar controls. "Hang on," he muttered, engaging the hyperdrive. The stars elongated as they jumped to safety, leaving behind the devastation of Drake's shattered fleet. Hours later, Davis stood on the bridge of the commandeered corvette, watching encrypted transmissions flood in. The Purifier's destruction had sent shockwaves through Drake's coalition. The Orlevan Syndicate was pulling out, leaving Drake's forces in disarray. A familiar face appeared on the main view screen. Varia, her eyes gleaming with fierce pride. "You magnificent bastard," she said. "You actually did it." Davis allowed himself a grim smile. "We both did. What's our next move?" "Nightfall Squadron," Varia breathed. "Looks like the Council's decided to get involved after all." Davis watched as the elite human commandos joined formation with their ragtag rebel fleet. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of real hope. "Let's end this," he said, setting course for the frontier system where Drake had gone to ground. As they prepared for the final push, Davis knew the true test still lay ahead. Drake was cornered, but a cornered enemy was often the most dangerous of all. The Nightfall Squadron's sleek ships sliced through the void, their stealth systems rendering them nearly invisible to Drake's remaining forces. Davis stood on the bridge of the commandeered corvette, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Incoming transmission," Chen reported, her fingers dancing across the console. A holographic image flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Commander Raxus, leader of the Nightfall Squadron. "Captain Davis, we have new intelligence. King Xenos is being held aboard Drake's flagship." Davis's brow furrowed. "Xenos? But he was in Varia's custody." The air seemed to leave the room. Davis gripped the edge of the console, his squeezing hard. "Varia?" Davis's mind raced, piecing together the implications. And now Drake's keeping him prisoner instead. "We'll need a distraction," he muttered. "Something to draw their fire while we slip in." Chen spoke up, her voice tight with anger. Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from Drake's flagship. They match known Syndicate biolab configurations. Davis's eyes narrowed. He's trying to weaponize the Pox further. We need to move fast. As they neared Drake's position, alarms blared across the small fleet. Multiple contacts, Chen shouted. Syndicate reinforcements dropping out of hyperspace. What the hell? Davis breathed. Raxus's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression grim. It seems Drake's bioweapon gambit has backfired. His own coalition is fracturing. Davis nodded, a plan forming. Then let's use that chaos to our advantage. All ships push through their lines. We're going for the flagship. The corvette bucked as it accelerated, weaving through the debris of shattered vessels. Nightfall fighters screamed past, their advanced weapons carving a path through Drake's defenses. They reached the flagship's docking bay, breaching teams deploying with practiced efficiency. Davis led the charge, his disruptor finding its mark on Syndicate shock troops, caught off guard by the sudden assault. Xenos lay strapped to a medical table, his Ferengi features twisted in pain. Syndicate scientists worked feverishly at consoles surrounding him, their attention fixed on rapidly scrolling data. Clear the room, Davis ordered. His team moved with brutal efficiency, neutralizing the scientists before they could raise the alarm. Davis approached Xenos, quickly releasing his restraints. The Ferengi King's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Davis with difficulty. Status report, Davis barked into his comm. Chen's voice came back, thick with static. Sir, Drake's remaining loyalists are making a last stand. But that's not all. We're picking up transmissions from the occupied Ferengi territories. There's open revolt against Drake's forces. Davis allowed himself a grim smile. Looks like your people haven't given up on you yet, Your Majesty. They reached the docking bay, Nightfall operatives providing cover fire as they boarded the waiting shuttle. As they rocketed away from Drake's failing flagship, Davis watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. The rebellion had gained new life, but the specter of the Centauri Pox loomed large. With Xenos rescued and Drake's coalition crumbling, the real fight was just beginning. It's time, the Ferengi King said, his voice low. Leak the information. With a nod, Davis transmitted the carefully crafted message. Encoded within innocuous trade data was the bait. Coordinates to a supposed Syndicate bioweapons facility housing the only known cure for the Centauri Pox. The effect was instantaneous. Drake's remaining ships altered course, converging on the nebula's heart. As they plunged deeper into the swirling plasma fields, Davis's comm crackled to life. The nebula erupted in chaos. Ferengi warships decloaked, their weapons blazing. Caught off guard and hemmed in by the volatile plasma, Drake's fleet found itself in a kill box. Nightfall Squadron, Davis ordered, jam their long-range communications. We can't let Drake call for help. As the battle raged, Davis led a strike team to board Drake's flagship. They fought through corridors choked with smoke and debris, disruptor fire echoing all around them. They reached the bridge to find Drake himself, cybernetic implants glowing beneath his skin. The Admiral moved with inhuman speed, cutting down two of Davis's Marines before they could react. Davis! Drake snarled, his augmented fist slamming into the captain's chest. Ignoring the searing pain in his side, Davis charged. He tackled Drake, disrupting the Admiral's killing blow against Xenos. They crashed into a control panel, sparks showering around them. Drake's cybernetic hand closed around Davis's throat. You could have been part of something greater, he hissed. Davis's vision blurred, but he saw Xenos rise behind Drake, a jagged piece of metal in his hands. The Ferengi King drove it deep into Drake's back, shorting out his implants in a shower of sparks. Davis raised his weapon, but hesitated. He couldn't risk hitting Ramirez. Sir, Chen's voice came over the comm. Nightfall Squadron is reporting multiple detonations across Drake's ship. They're scuttling it. Davis's eyes widened in realization. Get us out of here, now! They barely made it to their own shuttle before Drake's flagship began to break apart. As they raced clear of the destruction, Davis saw a Ferengi cruiser move into position. Its tractor beam locked onto Drake's escape pod, dragging it inexorably towards capture. On the shuttle's view screen, Xenos' face appeared. The Ferengi King's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "We have him, Captain. The war is won." Davis nodded, exhaustion washing over him. But as he watched Drake's pod disappear into the Ferengi ship's hold, he couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had come at a terrible cost. Davis watched the Ferengi cruiser vanish into hyperspace, Drake's escape pod secured in its hold. He turned to face his exhausted crew, their faces a mixture of relief and apprehension. "We've won the battle," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "But our work is far from done." Weeks passed in a blur of activity. Davis found himself overseeing a massive decontamination effort, coordinating with Ferengi medical teams to contain the spread of the Zentari pox. He stood in a makeshift command center, holographic displays surrounding him with grim statistics and outbreak projections. "Sir," Chen reported, her face haggard from lack of sleep, "we've received another data packet from the Vecran Collective. Their genetic analysis might be the breakthrough we need." Davis nodded, studying the complex biodata scrolling across his screen. The Vecran scientists, once persecuted under Drake's rule, now worked tirelessly to save those afflicted by his final act of vengeance. "Captain," the Ferengi monarch said, "I require your counsel. Join me aboard my flagship immediately." Hours later, Davis stood in Xenos' private chambers, watching as the king paced before a force field-enclosed cell. Inside, Admiral Drake sat motionless, his eyes following Xenos' movements with cold calculation. "Tell me again," Xenos snarled, "why I shouldn't space you this instant." Davis noticed the slight tremor in Drake's hands, the unnatural stiffness of his movements. A neural disruptor implant, he realized. Drake's vaunted combat enhancements were little more than dead weight now. "Indeed," Xenos confirmed. "My protege Jera leads a resistance movement, but they're outgunned and outnumbered. And now—" He trailed off, his shoulders sagging. Drake's laughter, harsh and mocking, filled the chamber. "Oh, how the mighty have fallen, the great King Xenos, reduced to begging for scraps of intelligence from a beaten foe." Xenos whirled, his eyes blazing. "Silence, you miserable—" "Wait," Davis interrupted, his mind racing. "Your Majesty, I think I see where this is going. You're considering a deal with Drake." The Ferengi King's silence was answer enough. Davis continued, choosing his words carefully. "It's risky, but it might be our only play. Drake's loyalists within the Black Talons could turn the tide." Drake leaned forward, his cybernetic implants glinting in the low light. "Full amnesty for my forces. Reinstatement into your new alliance. Those are my terms." Xenos' face contorted with barely suppressed rage. He turned to Davis, his voice low. "Can we trust him?" As Xenos reluctantly began negotiations with his captive, Davis's comm unit chirped. Chen's voice came through, tinged with urgency. Davis closed his eyes, feeling the weight of countless lives hanging in the balance. The confrontation with Drake had been the easy part, he realized. The true test lay ahead. The true test lay in the daring plan they were about to undertake. Davis strode onto the bridge of the Icarus, his eyes sharp. "Status report on the Grifkin distress call," he barked. Chen's fingers flew across her console. "Heavy casualties reported, sir. Black Talon forces have them pinned down on 3 fronts." Davis nodded, his mind racing. "Prepare for immediate departure. We're going in hot." As the Icarus rocketed towards the embattled Grifkin tribes, Davis's comm unit chirped. King Xenos' holographic form materialized, his features twisted with scarcely controlled fury. "Captain, Drake has made his move," the Ferengi monarch spat. "His loyalists within the Black Talons are defecting, but I fear it's merely another of his deceptions." Davis's eyes narrowed. "What makes you say that, Your Majesty?" "Call it intuition," Xenos growled. "I've dealt with creatures like Drake before. Be on your guard." The warning proved prescient. As the Icarus entered the combat zone, they found the Grifkin resistance in tatters. Drake's supposed defectors had led them into a devastating crossfire. "Evasive maneuvers," Davis shouted as Talon fighters screamed past, their energy weapons carving molten streaks across the Icarus's hull. Davis conferred with his tactical team, quickly formulating a daring rescue plan. Latian Ramirez would lead a marine infiltration team to sabotage Kraksathra's fusion core, while Jera's Ferengi commandos attempted to extract the prisoners. "Charges set," Ramirez reported, "ready to initiate overload on your command." Meanwhile, Jera's commandos breached the prison block. They located Everin and Larina, but found themselves pinned down by relentless fire from cybernetically enhanced Talon guards. "We need air support," Jera's voice crackled over the comm. "We're not getting out of here without it." Davis hesitated for a split second, weighing the risks. "Understood. Commencing strafing run." "Pull up," Davis ordered, but it was too late. Zhukov, struggling to navigate through the inferno, clipped one of Kraksathra's orbital gun batteries. The impact sheared off the Icarus's starboard nacelle, sending the ship into an uncontrolled spin. Alarms blared as system after system failed. Davis fought to maintain his footing as the bridge tilted wildly. "All hands, abandon ship," he shouted. "Get to the escape pods." As the crew scrambled to evacuate, Davis remained at his post, coordinating the exodus. He didn't notice the squad of black talons that slipped aboard amidst the chaos, planting their insidious traps throughout the dying vessel. The Icarus, once a proud flagship, now drifted helplessly in orbit around a turbulent planetoid. Its hull sparked and smoldered, a silent testament to the brutal battle that had unfolded. Aboard a nearby Ferengi vessel, Kailaus paced restlessly. The rebel leader's eyes never left the crippled Icarus, searching for any sign of life. His wife, Larina, was still unaccounted for. As Kailaus's team approached the wreckage, they remained unaware of the deadly trap that awaited them. The Black Talon's coded devices lay dormant, primed to spring at the slightest disturbance. The rescue shuttle docked with the Icarus's emergency airlock. Kailaus led the way, his breath ragged in the confines of his protective suit. "Stay alert," he warned his team. "We don't know what we're walking into." They moved deeper into the ship's darkened corridors, following the weak life signs. Sparks erupted from damaged consoles, casting eerie shadows. The air grew thicker with each step, tinged with the acrid smell of burning circuitry. Suddenly, a muffled groan echoed through the hall. Kailaus quickened his pace, hope surging in his chest. "Larina," he called out. His foot brushed against an innocuous piece of debris. A faint click was all the warning they had. "Ambush!" Kailaus shouted, struggling to his feet. "Fall back to the shuttle." Kailaus's team retreated, laying down suppressing fire. They reached the airlock, sealing it behind them, just as the Talons breached the final force field. "We can't leave without Larina," Kailaus growled, his hands flying over the shuttle's controls. "Sir," his second-in-command reported grimly, "there are no other life signs aboard. They're not here." "Talk," he snarled. "Where are the prisoners?" The Talon sneered, cybernetic implants pulsing beneath his skin. "Blood Moon Station," he spat. "Good luck breaching that fortress, rebel scum." Kailaus's comm crackled to life. Jera's voice, tense but controlled, came through. "Kailaus, rendezvous at these coordinates. We need to regroup." Hours later, aboard Jera's stealth frigate, Kailaus pored over hollow schematics of Blood Moon Station. The massive orbital platform loomed ominously, dripping with weapons. "It's a death trap," Jera said, her Ferengi features set in a grim mask. "But I might have a solution." She produced a small, pulsing device. Experimental syndicate tech, a cloaking field generator. "Exactly," Jera nodded. "But we'll need more firepower for the extraction." A new transmission cut through their planning. Davis's face appeared, haggard but determined. "Jera, Kailaus, we've made contact with King Xenos. He's agreed to provide reinforcements." The pieces fell into place. As Torin's ships engaged the Talon Armada, Jera's team would slip through using the cloaking device. Finally, the moment arrived. Torin's fleet dropped out of warp, immediately hammered by Blood Moon's orbital guns. Kailaus's shuttle detached from Jera's frigate, shimmering into invisibility. They breached Blood Moon's outer hull, the station's alarms silent. Jera led them through twisting corridors towards the central reactor. "Plant the charges," she ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll overload their systems, create chaos for the extraction." Suddenly, piercing wails filled the air. Holographic sentries materialized, their crimson forms flickering as they opened fire. "We've been made!" Kailash shouted, diving for cover. "Push forward!" The team fought their way deeper into the station, syndicate mercenaries converging from all sides. Kailash's enhanced hearing picked up frantic chatter. His blood ran cold. "Jera, they're moving Lorana and Everin." Kailash sprinted ahead, trusting his team to handle the rear guard. He reached a vast chamber, a yawning abyss at its center. A suspended cell dangled precariously, about to drop into the inferno below. Time slowed. Kailash raised his rifle, years of training guiding his aim. One shot. The cell's support cable severed, but instead of plummeting, it swung wildly to the side, crashing onto a maintenance gantry. They fought their way back through waves of syndicate troops. Alarms blared as the reactor destabilized. Kailash glimpsed Lorana, battered but alive, supported by Everin and Jera. They commandeered a Talon shuttle, blasting out of the disintegrating station. But their ordeal wasn't over. Swarms of hunter-killer drones pursued them, their plasma cannons carving molten furrows through space. "Evasive maneuvers!" Jera shouted, wrestling with the unfamiliar controls. The shuttle bucked and weaved, narrowly avoiding the onslaught. "Brace for impact," she yelled, as the rocky surface of the asteroid loomed large in their viewscreen. Viewscreen. Jera wrenched the controls, sending the shuttle into a controlled dive. They skimmed the asteroid's surface, scraping against jagged outcroppings, before slamming onto a narrow landing pad. "Everyone out!" Jera shouted, already prying open the emergency hatch. They stumbled onto the pad, gasping in the thin atmosphere. Varana's security teams swarmed around them, erecting energy shields as the pursuing drones screamed overhead. A ping on Kailash's comm drew his attention. King Xenos' holographic form materialized, his eyes gleaming with barely held-back excitement. "We have them," Xenos said, his voice low and intense. "Now we strike." The next days passed in a blur of strategy meetings and frantic preparation. Bolstered by the intel from Everin and Lorana, Xenos orchestrated a massive counteroffensive against the reeling Black Talons. "Jera's team is in position," Toran reported, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Commencing bombardment." The ship shuddered as massive energy weapons lashed out, carving molten furrows across Feroxy 6's defensive grid. Explosions blossomed in the planet's upper atmosphere as Jera's commandos systematically sabotaged key installations. Toran barked orders, scrambling to redirect fire, but Kailash knew it was too late. They didn't have the firepower to take out every vent in time. A new voice crackled over the comms. "This is Captain Davis. We're moving to intercept." The battered Icarus streaked past, diving into Feroxus 6's atmosphere. Kailash watched, breath held, as the ship executed a series of impossibly tight maneuvers, weaving between plasma eruptions to reach the central control nexus. "They did it," Toran breathed as the vents began to close. "They've overridden the system." "This is Overlord Azjek," a cold modulated voice declared. "You have made a grave miscalculation. Behold the fury of the Grand Convocation." Sensor readings went wild as hundreds of ships dropped out of warp. A nomadic armada of the most feared mercenary fleets in known space, united under Azjek's banner. But as the days stretched into weeks, it became clear that help was not coming. The noble houses bickered among themselves, paralyzed by indecision and political maneuvering. "So," Kailash said, his voice tight, "it's just us." Xenos' eyes swept across the assembled leaders, his voice low but intense. "There's one last gambit we haven't tried, the human smuggler clans." "Precisely why Azjek won't expect it," Xenos countered. He tapped a series of commands into his personal datapad. "I've already made contact with their patriarch, Varric Cord. He's agreed to a parley." Hours later, Kailash found himself aboard a nondescript shuttle, slipping past the Grand Convocation's patrol routes. Beside him, Xenos sat in tense silence, his fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the armrest. Varric Cord cut an imposing figure, his weathered face a map of old scars beneath a shock of white hair. He regarded Xenos with open skepticism. "So the king of pirates comes begging at my doorstep," Cord rumbled. "This had better be good." Xenos laid out his proposal, his words measured and precise. Cord's expression remained impassive, but his eyes glittered with growing interest. "My word," Xenos said simply, "and the knowledge that we'll need each other long after this war ends." "My crews are smugglers, not soldiers," Cord said. "We need someone who knows how to wage war. Davis has that experience." The negotiations stretched on, a web of demands and concessions. When they emerged from Cord's chambers, Xenos looked drained but satisfied. Days blurred together as Davis oversaw the transformation of Cord's lumbering freighters into makeshift warships. Cargo bays became missile banks, smuggling compartments housed targeting arrays. The smoky air of Venture Station's improvised dockyards rang with the constant din of welding torches and shouted orders. Davis wiped sweat from his brow, squinting at a schematic. "These power couplings won't hold," he muttered. "We need to reinforce." An alarm klaxon cut him off. Cord's voice boomed over the station's comms. "Ozjek's making his move. All ships, battle stations." "Remember the plan," Davis's voice crackled across the comms. "Hit hard, hit fast, and don't stick around to trade punches." The rogue traders struck like lightning, their unorthodox formations confounding Ozjek's seasoned commanders. Cargo ships disgorged swarms of attack drones. Tankers ignited clouds of vaporized fuel, engulfing enemy squadrons in flames. In the war room of Venture Station, Xenos pored over tactical displays. "We're running out of time," he growled. "Jera, are you in position?" "Affirmative," she whispered, "awaiting your signal." "All ships," Davis commanded, his voice tight with anticipation. "This is our window. Hit those shipyards with everything we've got." "Got!" Davis's voice crackled over the comms. "Don't celebrate yet," Xenos warned, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Jera, status?" "Moving to Phase 2, Jera's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Boarding teams are go." In space, the battle raged. Davis's retrofitted freighters danced between convocation cruisers, their unorthodox maneuvers confounding seasoned tacticians. Missile salvos erupted from repurposed cargo bays, while energy weapons concealed in smuggling compartments carved molten furrows across enemy hulls. "Push for the shipyards," Davis ordered, his voice tight with concentration. "Don't let them regroup." "Impossible," Ozjek roared. "All ships converge on the shipyards. Crush these vermin." "Now," Xenos commanded, seizing the moment of opportunity. "Course locked in," the helmswoman reported, her fist clenched on the controls. "May whatever gods are listening have mercy on us." "All ships, fall back!" Ozjek's voice boomed across all frequencies. "Emergency withdrawal!" "We've done it," Xenos breathed, allowing himself a moment of victory. "Arcadius is neutralized." Xenos leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "It seems Ozjek's alliance isn't as strong as he thought. Kaila's, contact Jera. Tell her to push our advantage. It's time to sow some real chaos." As the battered convocation armada limped away from Arcadius, internal comm chatter erupted with accusations and threats. Underlord Zevron's ships abruptly broke formation, opening fire on Ozjek's flagship. "Traitor," Ozjek's voice boomed. "You dare challenge me?" What began as an organized withdrawal devolved into a frenzied free-for-all. Rival warlords turned on each other, old grudges and simmering resentments exploding to the surface. Jera's insurgents slipped between the warring factions, surgical strikes crippling key vessels, and further destabilizing the fragile command structure. The once mighty convocation tore itself apart from within. Back on Xenos's flagship, Kaila's watched the unfolding chaos with a mix of awe and trepidation. "We've opened Pandora's box," he murmured. Hours later, Xenos stood before a hastily assembled delegation of former convocation warlords. The once proud mercenary commanders now looked haggard, their ornate armor scored and dented. "The Grand Convocation is no more," Xenos declared, his voice firm but not triumphant. "But I offer you a place in what comes next, a chance to build something lasting from the ashes of this conflict." Captain Davis watched from the sidelines, his expression guarded. As the warlords filed out, He approached Xenos. It won't be easy, integrating them into a new power structure. Xenos nodded grimly. Which is why I'm entrusting you with overseeing the transition. Your experience will be invaluable. Kailash found himself in a tense meeting with Varric Cord, the grizzled smuggler patriarch eyeing him warily across a table, strewn with star charts and territorial claims. A confederacy, eh? Cord growled, stroking his beard. Sounds pretty for a press release, but what's the real play here? Cord's eyes narrowed. And what do you want in return? Our undying loyalty? Your cooperation, Xenos countered. Your expertise, your connections. In exchange, I'm prepared to offer significant concessions. Favored trade status for human commercial interests. Representation in the new government. The negotiations stretched on for days, a delicate dance of offers and counteroffers. When the dust settled, a new compact was signed, the Frontier Confederacy, with Xenos as its nominal head. Tauren, one of Xenos' most trusted advisors, stormed into the war room. This is madness, he snarled, slamming a datapad onto the table. You're giving away the Empire to these dregs. Xenos' expression hardened. The old Empire is dead, Tauren. We must adapt or perish. Adapt? Tauren spat. You mean surrender. We should be consolidating our power, not parceling it out to pirates and rebels? The argument escalated, drawing the attention of other Ferengi officers. Davis watched with growing unease as the rift widened, splitting the Ferengi leadership into factions. Xenos' grip tightened on the arms of his command chair. Open a channel, all frequencies. Tauren's face appeared on the main view screen, twisted with disdain. I hereby denounce the weak leadership of Xenos and declare the restoration of the true Ferengi Empire. All loyal Ferengi, rally to me. Xenos' face hardened into a mask of cold perseverance. Jera, I'm giving you a new mission. Find Ajek and Zevron. Eliminate them, by any means necessary. Understood, Jera replied, her voice unnervingly calm. As the flagship erupted into frantic activity, Davis slipped away. He made his way to a secure communications array, his fingers flying over the controls. Davis allowed himself a grim smile. Hello, Elena. I need your help. We all do. Davis pulled out a data chip, sliding it across the worn metal surface. Schematics, weapon designs, everything you need to turn those rust buckets of yours into something that can go toe-to-toe with Ajek's cruisers. Cord's thick fingers closed around the chip. This ain't standard issue stuff. No, Davis admitted. It's not, but it's our best shot at leveling the playing field. Davis watched as a massive antimatter warhead was carefully maneuvered into place. How long? He asked the grease-stained technician beside him. 2 days for the first wave, the man replied. Maybe a week for the full fleet. Computer, open a secure channel to Commodore Hanson, she ordered. We need to launch an investigation, quietly. On a nameless jungle world, King Xenos crouched in the undergrowth, his once regal robes torn and stained. The distant rumble of engines made him tense, but the ships that broke through the thick cloud cover bore Tauren's insignia, not Jera's. Xenos allowed himself a thin smile as he activated a concealed communicator. Tauren, he said, his voice hoarse, it's time we discuss the future of our people. The trade order's vast orbital habitat loomed before Xenos' shuttle, a gleaming construct of metal and crystalline viewports. As he stepped onto the immaculate docking bay, flanked by stone-faced trade order security, Xenos straightened his shoulders. He had one chance to sway the megacorporation's economic might to his cause. Ajek's flagship rocked as another volley of missiles slammed into its shields. On the bridge, the warlord snarled in frustration. How are these vermin suddenly outgunning us? A battlefield hologram flickered to life, showing a heavily modified freighter unleashing a barrage of energy weapons that should have been far beyond its capabilities. Sevron's face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression grim. We're being bled dry, Ajek. These raids are costing us more than we can afford to lose. Before Ajek could respond, alarms blared. My lord, a sensor operator called out. We're detecting a massive energy signature. It's It's an antimatter warhead. In the ensuing chaos, neither warlord noticed the flickering data stream being uploaded to their systems. Carefully crafted misinformation about King Xenos' location. Jera's hands shook as she piloted her battered shuttle away from the smoldering ruins of Cord's outpost. The stench of burned flesh and molten metal clung to her, a visceral reminder of her failure, of the lives lost to Virox's relentless assault. Her eyebrows furrowed as she set a course for Azjek's last known position. There would be a reckoning, she vowed, for Cord's people, for her own shattered pride. But first she had to convince Azjek of her worth. Davis felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his voice steady. Of course, Admiral. I'm at your disposal. As the transmission ended, an explosion lit up the view screen. Another of Xavron's fuel refineries erupted in flames, the carefully orchestrated strike pushing the frontier further into chaos. Davis knew the stakes were rising with every passing moment. He just hoped he could keep all the pieces in play long enough to see his gambit through. Davis's comm unit chimed again. Admiral Ramirez's stern visage filled the screen, her eyes narrowed. Captain, we need to talk. Now. You'd better, Ramirez cut him off, because right now it looks like you've gone rogue. Davis took a deep breath. The situation out here is worse than you know. The Syndicate warlords were steamrolling everything in their path. We needed an edge, and fast. So you decided to arm criminals? Ramirez's voice dripped with disapproval. I made a calculated decision, Davis countered. Without Dominion support, we had to level the playing field somehow. It was that or watch the entire sector fall. Across the sector, King Xenos stood before the Trade Order Council, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. Gentlemen, I come to you with a proposition, one that will secure your profits and bring stability to the frontier. The Trade Order representatives leaned forward, intrigued. Xenos outlined his plan, leveraging their vast economic influence to strangle Toran's supply lines. Credits flowed, trade routes shifted, and within days, Toran's fleets began to falter. You win, Azjek spat. What now? Xavron's laugh was cold. Now? Now you serve me, or you die. As Xavron's command structure collapsed, Xenos should have been celebrating. Instead, he paced his war room, increasingly paranoid. Traitors, he muttered. Traitors everywhere. Meanwhile, Davis led a daring assault on Xavron's quarantine flagship. Boarding teams, move in, he barked into his comms. Remember, we need that ship intact. As the battle raged, a lone shuttle weaved through the chaos. Lorana, Kailas's wife, gritted her teeth as she dodged weapons fire. In the back, Davis's advisors huddled, their faces grim. They'd barely escaped Dominion custody, and now their future hung by a thread. He nodded, knowing this conversation was long overdue. As he prepared to face the music, explosions rocked Xavron's flagship. The endgame had begun, but for whom? The comlink crackled with static as Davis prepared to face Admiral Ramirez. Before he could speak, alarms blared throughout the ship. A frantic voice cut through the chaos. Captain, multiple hostiles incoming. Davis's eyes widened as he saw the swarm of fighters on the tactical display. Xavron's forces had found them. Evasive maneuvers, he barked. Get our people out of there. Hang on, Lorana shouted, her fingers dancing across the controls. The shuttle lurched as she executed a series of impossible turns, narrowly avoiding destruction. A familiar voice crackled over the comms. This is Jera, I'll draw their fire. Get clear. Before Davis could protest, Jera's fighter screamed past, guns blazing. She tore into the pursuing squadron, buying precious seconds for Lorana's escape. Jera, no! Davis shouted, but it was too late. Her fighter erupted in a ball of flame, scattering the attackers long enough for Lorana to punch through their lines. As they limped to safety, Davis's throat tightened. Jera's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Xavron's fist slammed into the armrest of his command chair. Incompetent fools, he snarled. I want Davis's head. A towering figure stepped from the shadows. Half man, half machine, Virox's cybernetic eye glowed an ominous red. You summoned me, Lord Xavron? The enforcer's voice was a cold metallic rasp. Zevron's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Find Davis's officers. Kill them all." Across the sector, the hunt began. Davis's command structure crumbled as Virox's relentless pursuit claimed life after life. Those who survived scattered, desperately seeking refuge in the darkest corners of the frontier. Admiral Ramirez paced her office, her career hanging by a thread. The secure terminal chimed, displaying a priority message from one of Davis's fleeing officers, her eyes sharp as she read the desperate plea for aid. Meanwhile, Kylaz's rebel network sprang into action. Safe houses were established, identities forged, and a complex web of misinformation spun to throw Virox off the scent. The cybernetic killer tracked a group of officers to a hidden way station deep in asteroid belt. Virox's ship docked with brutal efficiency, cutting through the station's meager defenses smoothly. "This is Captain Davis to any Allied ships," he shouted into the comms. "We are under attack. Request immediate assistance." "We're hit," the pilot yelled. "We can't make it." Davis watched helplessly as Virox breached the final defenses. His team prepared for their last stand, tenacity etched on their faces. Just as all seemed lost, space lit up with weapons fire. A Dominion battle group dropped out of warp, their guns blazing. Virox's ship was vaporized in seconds. "This is Admiral Ramirez," a familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Sorry we're late to the party." Davis sagged with relief, but the victory was short-lived. Ramirez's face appeared on the console, her expression grim. "I'm facing court-martial for this, James," she said, "but I'm not going down without a fight." Then came the moment that would haunt Kylaz forever. Virox's fleet appeared in orbit around his homeworld, raining death from above. As cities burned, Kylaz managed to evacuate only a fraction of his people before the planet was reduced to ash. Finally, with nowhere left to run, Davis found himself cornered. His ragtag fleet faced certain annihilation at Virox's hands. "This is Jera." The transmission was weak, barely audible. "I have vital intelligence on Virox's weaknesses. Patch me through to Davis immediately." The transmission from Jera crackled with static, but her words ignited a spark of hope in Davis's chest. He leaned forward, gripping the console. "Jera? We thought you were dead." "No time to explain," she replied, her voice strained. "Virox has a critical weakness in his neural implants. Target frequency, 87.3 megahertz with a focused EMP burst. It'll overload his systems." Davis's fingers flew across the tactical display. "All ships, recalibrate EMP emitters to 87.3 megahertz. Fire on my mark." As Virox's fleet closed in, a blinding pulse erupted from Davis's ships. The cyborg enforcers' vessels suddenly veered off course, their systems failing. On the primary view screen, Davis watched Virox's flagship careen into an asteroid, erupting in a spectacular explosion. Zeno stroked his chin, considering. "And what of our previous disagreements?" "They're secondary to the threat Zevron poses," Davis countered. "We need to strike while he's vulnerable." Intelligence reports flooded in, painting a grim picture. Zevron had retreated to the Drax quarantine zone, a sector of space rendered uninhabitable by mutagenic spores. Lorana, held captive along with other xenobiologists, was being forced to weaponize the deadly particles. "Precision strikes," Xenos interjected, his eyes gleaming. "My Ferengi commandos are experts in surgical extractions." As they finalized their battle plans, an urgent transmission cut through. Commander Toran's face appeared, his expression hard. "My lord," he addressed Xenos, "I have mobilized our armada. We stand ready to glass the entire Drax sector." But Toran's gaze was filled with fanatical perseverance. "The human infestation must be purged, my king. It is the only way to ensure Ferengi dominance." Xenos's fist clenched. "This changes everything. We must move now, before Toran can act." In the chaos, an unexpected ally emerged. A faction of Zevron's cyborg troops, disillusioned with their master, offered crucial intelligence. Their leader, a towering figure of flesh and metal, faced Davis on the Harbinger's bridge. Davis glanced at Xenos, who nodded grimly. "Name it." He turned to his assembled officers, willpower etched on his face. Prep for final assault. We end this now. Davis's fingers tightened on the console as he considered the cyborg leader's demands. The metallic being's red eye glowed, awaiting a response. Very well, Davis said. We have a deal. As the cyborg transmitted data to their systems, Davis pulled Jera aside. I don't trust them, he whispered. This feels like a setup. Jera's eyes narrowed. I agree. We need a contingency plan. They huddled over a tactical display, voices low as they formulated a daring counter-strategy. Misinformation would be key, feeding the cyborgs false intel, while Davis and a select team infiltrated Zevron's stronghold. Hours later, Davis stood before a mirror, adjusting the crude cybernetic implants that would allow his team to pass as the cyborg defectors. The cold metal against his skin made his stomach churn. It's a trap, Jera's voice crackled over the comm. The cyborgs betrayed us. Weapons fire erupted from multiple directions, pinning Davis's team in the lab. Through the chaos, he glimpsed a familiar face, one of Xenos' advisors, grinning malevolently as he input commands into a nearby terminal. Horror gripped Davis as he realized what was happening. The Doomsday device was activating prematurely. A sickly green mist began seeping through the ventilation systems. Davis watched in horror as some of his team members caught in its path, began to convulse, their bodies twisting grotesquely. Go, Lorana screamed, shoving him towards the exit. I'll hold them off. Anguish tore through Davis as he made the impossible choice. With a final look at Lorana's determined face, he led the surviving members of his team in a desperate sprint for their extraction point. How many made it out? He asked, his voice hoarse. Admiral Ramirez's face was ashen. Not enough, she replied. We're picking up distress calls from all over the sector, but that cloud is spreading faster than we can respond. Sir, a communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission. It's King Xenos. The Ferengi leader's smug face appeared on screen, triumph evident in his voice. Did you really think you could outsmart me, Davis? Your human arrogance knows no bounds. You betrayed us all, Davis snarled. How many billions will die for your ambition? Xenos' lips curled into a cruel smile. A necessary sacrifice to purge the frontier of your kind's influence. But don't worry, your legacy will live on, in a manner of speaking. The transmission cut to a view of Davis's own ships, caught in the mutagenic cloud, their hulls twisted and warped, fusing with the mutated remains of their crews. Xenos' voice continued, dripping with malice. All hands, brace for impact, Admiral Ramirez shouted. Davis gripped his chair as the ship plunged into the miasma. Alarms blared, systems failing as the corrosive cloud ate through their defenses. Through it all, one thought burned in his mind. This isn't over, not by a long shot.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.